The first sound wasn't a command. It was contempt. Do you even know where you are, old man? The words cracked across echo range at Camp Pendleton, sharp enough to freeze a platoon of recruits mid-stride. Gunnery Sergeant Mara Voss. Her frame coiled like steel cable, stood with boots planted in the dust, eyes locked on the intruder. On a weathered bench at the edge of the training field sat a man carved out of time itself. Sergeant Major Elias Mack Hargrove. Rhett, skin lined like leather left too long in the sun, leaned on his cane and simply watched. He didn't flinch under her glare. He didn't apologize. He didn't move. This is Marine Corps ground. Voss barked, every syllable a hammer, not a park for you to rest your bones. The recruits' kids barely out of high school stared in silence. They had seen Voss break men twice their size with words alone. But the old man's calm unsettled them more than any shout. I asked you a question, she pressed, gravel crunching under polished boots. Finally, Mack's pale blue eyes lifted, steady as a rifle sight. His voice was quiet, yet it carried, I know exactly where I am. Sergeant. A ripple moved through the platoon. No one talked back to Voss. No one. For nearly an hour he had sat there, arriving in a battered sedan and settling beneath a crooked pine, silent, intent, his eyes not on buildings but on recruits, their stance, their discipline, their grit. Less curiosity than evaluation, and that cut deeper than any insult. Voss snapped, storming over with Staff Sergeant Royce Gunny Hale and Staff Sergeant Marco Chavez, flanking her like wolves at the scent of blood. Identification. Now, you're on a secure installation. Either hand it over, or the MPs drag you out in cuffs. The recruits held their breath. This confrontation felt more real than any drill and unshakable force colliding with an immovable object. Slowly, deliberately. Mack reached into the pocket of his worn jacket. The field went silent. Even the cadence chants from distant platoons seemed to vanish. Whatever he pulled out next would shatter the fragile balance of control on echo range. Where are you watching this from? Texas? California? Maybe overseas? Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these untold stories of courage. Mack's hand moved slowly, unhurried, as though time itself bent to his rhythm. That calmness, the absence of fear, of apology, only sharpened Gunnery Sergeant Mara Voss's fury. To her, age was not wisdom, it was weakness, an insult to the discipline she had sworn to uphold. As his fingers brushed inside his pocket, the cuff of his jacket slid back. The recruits closest to him gasped. Ink, faded by decades of sun and sweat, peeked through an eagle with wings spread, arrows clutched tight. Voss dismissed it with a glance. Vanity from a relic. She missed the detail that mattered. For Mack, the glimpse of that tattoo was a trigger. The present dissolved. Echo range vanished. A jungle reeked of rot and cordite. California's dry air thickened into the wet heat of 1969. He was young again, hands gripping an M14, the tattoo fresh and black on his arm. Gunfire shredded the night. Mortars crashed too close, spraying hot metal. A voice screamed his name. "Mack, cover us!" And then it folded. He was back under the crooked pine, an old man with a cane, sweat drying on skin that still carried ghosts. The recruits whispered uneasily. All but one. Private Noah Keene stood frozen, eyes locked on the old man's forearm. Unlike the others, he saw more than an eagle. In the faded lines hid another mark etched so small it could be mistaken for wrinkles. A skull crowned by a 5-pointed star. Noah's blood ran cold. He'd seen it before, buried in obscure articles and declassified footnotes, unit existence unverified. Task Force Kestrel, if that mark was real. Then the man before them wasn't just a stranger. He was a ghost from a war no one dared record. Noah remembered fragments, grainy photos, whispers signed with call signs, rumors of men who vanished into jungles and returned as something the Corps couldn't acknowledge. The Kestrel skull was more myth than record, but its presence was undeniable. Back on Echo Range, Voss and her instructors tightened the noose. Their clipped orders fell heavy. To them, Mack was an intruder testing limits. To him, they were children barking at thunder. Noah's chest constricted. He had never seen a confrontation so raw. His training told him to stay in line. His instinct told him to act. He needed help, not from the drill line. That evening at chow, while instructors counted heads, he slipped away into shadow. Every step was risk, but the secret weighed too heavy. He repeated the details in his mind like Cadence Eagle. Skull, star, the man's posture, his eyes. When recruits were released for the night, Noah did what no Marine recruit was supposed to. He found the payphone behind the PX, its receiver cold in his hand. He dialed a number burned into him since childhood. Jacob Keane answered. Voice clipped, suspicious. Noah, you're not supposed to be Grandpa. Listen. Noah's words tumbled out an old man on a bench, the eagle tattoo, the hidden skull and star. Every detail. Nothing spared. On the other end. Silence, then the scrape of a chair, papers shifting. Jacob's voice dropped, hard and steady. Say the name again. Noah did. His grandfather's breath hitched. 10 seconds stretched into eternity. Then, do not let them move him. Do whatever it takes, create a distraction. Fake an injury. I don't care. Keep him there. I'll handle the rest. Noah gripped the phone tighter. That urgency wasn't just concern, it was command. The kind of voice that once ordered battalions. And in that instant, Noah knew this was bigger than any drill. Miles away, in a sterile office piled with reports, Colonel Andrew Carver jolted when Jacob Keane's number flashed on his secure line. The call lasted minutes, but cracked decades of silence when it ended. Carver's face was pale. Get me every sealed file on Elias Hargrove. Now. An aide returned with a dust-streaked folder stamped in red service record sealed, 1967-1971. Carver flipped it open. A photograph stared back a young Marine with eyes too old for his years. The name matched. The file declared KIA, Vietnam. But a note scrawled in faded ink told another story. Operations ongoing. Records suppressed. Carver's jaw clenched. He slammed the folder shut. Somewhere on Echo Range, an old man sat on a bench. But inside him lay truth that could upend everything the Corps thought it had buried. And Carver knew one thing with chilling certainty. Paper could bury a man, but it couldn't kill a legend. The barracks felt unnervingly quiet, as though the air itself had been sucked out of Echo Range. Private Noah Keane knew with sudden clarity that this wasn't a simple dispute between an old man and drill instructors. He was standing inside the shadow of history. Miles away. Inside the paneled calm of base headquarters, Colonel Andrew Carver had expected another day drowned in budget reports. That ended when the red phone on his desk buzzed. The caller ID froze him retired, Colonel Jacob Keane, mentor, friend, a man who had never once raised a false alarm. Jack. What is it? Carver asked. What came next unraveled him. Jacob repeating what his grandson had seen an old man on a bench. A tattoo faded but undeniable. A name that should have been carved into the memorial wall decades ago. Are you certain? Carver whispered. The record says Elias Hargrove died in 98. The record was wrong, Jacob said flatly. That's him. I'd stake my life on it. Carver slammed the receiver down. His chest tightened. Get me the sealed file, he barked. Minutes later. A dust-coated folder thudded onto his desk, stamped with the highest clearance. He opened it and froze. A black and white photo of a young Marine stared back, eyes unyielding, unmistakably the same. Inside was a citation no one was meant to read, a Navy Cross awarded under classified orders. Valor buried because the truth bent too far. One man, holding against impossible odds, while his brothers slipped into jungle mist and survived. My God, Carver muttered. Elias Mack Hargrove, Sergeant Major, Task Force Kestrel. A name erased to protect the Corps from the shadows of its own history. He shot to his feet. Vehicle. Now. And get the base, Sergeant Major. Headquarters erupted into motion, back on Echo Range. Gunnery Sergeant Mara Voss's patience snapped. The old man had produced a wallet at last, but his movements were unhurried, deliberate, as if every second belonged to him. To her, it was provocation. To him, it was dignity. That's it, she barked, steel in her voice. You're detained for trespass and obstruction. We'll sort this at the station. She signaled to an aide to call MPs. Stepping close as if to seize his arm, it was the ultimate insult, not just a challenge to his freedom, but to his sanity. For a man like Mack Hargrove, who had carried silence longer than some of these recruits had been alive, it was nearly unforgivable. And then came the sound. At first faint, then swelling a storm of sirens. Every head turned to the road. 3 black command vehicles tore through the dust. Lights strobing. They did not slow. The convoy skidded onto the sacred parade ground. Brakes screaming. Doors slammed open before the wheels stopped rolling. Colonel Carver himself stepped out, face set like thunder. The base sergeant major beside him like a shadow. The recruits froze. The drill instructors stiffened. Silence spread like a shockwave. The 2 most powerful men on base strode across the field, and everyone knew they weren't here for training. The parade ground held its breath. The recruits, restless only moments ago, now stood frozen in reverent silence. Colonel Carver's words cut through the stillness and reshaped everything they thought they knew. Elias Mack Hargrove was no trespasser. He was living proof that legends do not fade. They walk among us in worn jackets and quiet eyes. Sergeant Voss opened her mouth, but nothing came. She had treated a Titan like a vagrant. Shame flushed her pale face. Mack rose slowly from the bench. He did not look like a man demanding apology. He looked like someone who had carried memory's weight for half a century. His voice, when it came, was calm and steady. Discipline makes Marines, he said, scanning their faces. But compassion makes leaders. Orders will fade. Drills will be forgotten. But you'll never forget the man who stood beside you when it mattered most. The words sank deeper than any reprimand. The recruits felt them in their bones. Voss's rigid posture cracked. Her eyes glistened. Mack's gaze softened not condemnation, but teaching. And that was harder to bear, in his mind. The years rolled back the humid jungle, the smell of rain and cordite, the sting of a needle etching the eagle, skull and star into young skin. It had never been about glory. It had been about the man to the left and the man to the right. Family. That was the truth the world had forgotten. The fallout came swift. Voss was reassigned, not discharged, a second chance carved from Mack's insistence on grace. Her new duty to build a course, reminding every instructor that the Corps is forged not just from iron, but from memory. When the first class opened, Elias Hargrove's name was spoken aloud, not in whispers but in pride. Weeks later, in a quiet cafe off base, Voss found him again. She apologized, voice trembling. Mack invited her to sit. Forgiveness came not in ceremony, but in the quiet act of sharing coffee. The recruits of Platoon 387 would never forget that day. They had come to training to become Marines. Instead, they had witnessed something rarer the moment a ghost returned to remind them what the Corps truly meant. Because heroes don't announce themselves. They sit quietly on benches until history stands up to salute them.